This morning's reading is a healing story. And like the Samaritan woman at the well that we've been reading about for the last 3 weeks, it's another story of acceptance. It opens with Jesus commenting about his not quite being accepted in Judea. Later, a government official hopes to be accepted by Jesus because he is in a dire situation. Finally, Jesus performs a miraculous healing. So people of God, give listen, for I speak of the good news of Jesus of Nazareth. From John chapter 4, verses 43 through 54, Jesus had said, prophets are honored everywhere except in their own country. Then 2 days later, he left and went to Galilee. The people there welcomed him because they had gone to the festival in Jerusalem and had seen everything he had done. While Jesus was in Galilee, he returned to the village of Cana, where he had turned the water into wine. There was an official in Capernaum whose son was sick. And when the man heard that Jesus had come from Judea, he went and begged him to keep his son from dying. Jesus told the official, "You won't have faith unless you see miracles and wonders." The man replied, "Lord, please come before my son dies." Jesus then said, "Your son will live. Go home to him." The man believed and started back home. Some of the official's servants met him along the road and told him, "Your son is better." He then asked them when the boy got better. And they answered, "The fever left him yesterday at 1 o'clock. The boy's father realized that at 1 o'clock the day before, Jesus had told him, "Your son will live." So the man and everyone in his family put their faith in Jesus. This was the second miracle that Jesus worked after he left Judea and went to Galilee. And there ends our reading. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
How high is the heat? I am sweating like nobody's business up here. Good God. All right. The passage we read this morning opened with Jesus saying, "Prophets are honored everywhere except their own country." In the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus makes a similar statement. In those instances, he's recorded as saying it because the folks in Nazareth question or reject him. In John's Gospel, Jesus is recorded as saying this as an explanation as to why he has left Judea. John understands Judea to be Jesus' home country, not Galilee, not Nazareth. While John does not provide us with a birth narrative for Jesus as in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, there's no Christmas story in John, John does understand that Jesus is descended from the line of David, was born in Bethlehem, the town where David lived in Judea. Thus, Jesus has not been fully accepted by those in Judea or Jerusalem. This is important for us to recognize. Judea and Galilee were distinct communities and distinct cultures from each other. They were both Jewish in religious practice and ethnicity, but there were differences. Judea was a big city, had Jerusalem as its big city, and everything was centered around Jerusalem and the temple. The government was based around the temple. The temple council ran everything. It was also more Greek and more Roman than Galilee by a lot. There was a lot of the influences of the empire, the influences of everything that had ever happened with Alexander the Great and all that was built into Jerusalem. Some of the high priests in Jerusalem, some of that group, had Greek names. That whole area, Jerusalem and Judea, was overseen by the Sanhedrin. We mentioned them a few weeks ago. They were the ruling council of religious figures. Galilee was someplace different. Galilee, far more rural, far more pastoral. It was far more traditional. People in Judea thought of Galilee as a bit of a backwater. A bunch of hicks up there in Galilee. Galilee had no cities. There were a couple of large towns. A couple of those had been recently built in hopes to Romanize the area. The cities of Tiberias and the cities of Sepphoris. It wasn't really going to work, but they tried. The temple in Jerusalem was several days' walk for Galilee. So the temple's influence was not as strong as the local synagogue. Finally, Galilee was ruled by Herod Antipas, the ethnarch, or king-led, or whatever, a Roman stooge, who ruled over the area with the Romans overseeing him. But he had a lot more freedom to do what he wanted to do than what the folks ruling Jerusalem wanted to do, because the Romans had a much closer eye on Jerusalem. So in leaving Samaria, Jesus heading to Galilee, his adopted country, where he expects to be and is better received by the Galileans, because they had seen him at the Passover celebration. They had seen him in Jerusalem at the Passover. We read about this back in January. And I am certain there was no shortage of when the Galileans got home, because not everybody went, right? But they were there, kind of like on social media now. If you see something, you've got to put up a picture about it or a quick video or whatever, because you were there and you saw it and you want to share the news. I'm sure the Galileans got home and said, "You wouldn't believe what Jesus, Joseph's son, did down in Jerusalem. Holy smoke." He marches in like he owns the place. He walks into the temple and he throws out the moneylenders and he throws out the animal sellers and he says all this stuff, and then he starts preaching and teaching. I think he was healing people. That's the world, or that's the community, that's the vibe Jesus is walking home back into. He comes back and he's well received. He's traveling around Galilee preaching and teaching. He goes to Cana where he did the whole water to wine bit. He gets approached by a government official. We don't know who this official worked for. Could have been Roman. Could have worked for Herod, could have been a traveling person, but probably from the area, because it sounds like he lives there. But no matter what, the people who first heard this story, what is that? Oh, the government official wants Jesus now? Yuck. It's probably a tax collector, or some other government person to keep us down. But that official has a need. He knows he needs Jesus. His son is sick. His son is dying. He decides, forget it. Doesn't matter who I am. Doesn't matter that Jesus is some sort of Jewish peasant. Doesn't matter that I'm a big shot. Doesn't mean that I got money in my pocket. He doesn't. Doesn't matter anything. He throws all his dignity aside and all the vulnerability he's got. And the scripture says he begs Jesus, "Come, heal my son." Jesus challenges the man's faith. You don't have faith unless you see miracles and wonders. Which could be understood to Jesus saying, "Are you one of those people who needs a spectacle to believe?" The man begs Jesus, "Please come to my son, heal him." And Jesus says, "Your son will live." The man takes Jesus for his word, turns around, heads for home. Journeying home, encounters his servants, who inform him, "Hey, Your son's illness left. He's good. They figure out it occurred the moment that Jesus said the boy would live. And John records this as being the second miracle, a second sign. Distinct from all the other miracles, this is a sign. This is one of the best stories of Jesus being a healer. Because Jesus, when he heals, doesn't care who you are. Doesn't care who you've been. Doesn't care what your story is. Jesus will heal you nonetheless. I'd like to think of the three ways in which, and it's not an all-encompassing list, but I promise we have an annual meeting coming afterwards. I'd like to move things along. So there's three ways that Jesus heals. First and foremost, physical healing. Second, emotional healing. And third, and most important, spiritual healing. In regards to physical healing, there are medical miracles. Cases of illnesses and injury resolving in ways unexpected. Some scientific events, discoveries, sometimes come in really weird ways that create healing. Who'd have thought moldy bread would become one of the best antibiotics the world's ever seen? Penicillin. These types of miracles, the ones that we think of first, the ones where I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, then God healed me. They have little to do with the power of prayer and more to do with the power of Jesus. Because Jesus works his will for his purposes and not ours. Praying harder does not make God do anything. It's spiritually immature to hold that belief. We all know people who suffered and died despite the most sincere and hardest praying that's ever been done. God works in God's ways. If a miracle happens, that's great. But we can't try to force God to provide a miraculous healing. But I will add to this list of healing that God does do, I call it the backhanded healing miracle. Some of us have heard stories. The one that I love, a guy, lifelong bicyclist, goes riding every day, long rides, that's how he stays fit and that kind of thing. Guy got in a bike wreck, which is not anything anyone ever would have expected. This wasn't some person learning how to ride a bike. This is a guy who rode 20 miles a day. Wrecks on his bike. He's got all sorts of broken this, broken that, torn this, torn that. Well, the guy's a mess. So they put him in one of the machines, they do the big, huge body scans, they see the breaks, they see the tears, they see that they're calling down the orthopedist, and they say, oh, wait a minute, what's that lump? What's that lump? Oh, it's cancer. Well, while we're busy putting you back together again, let's just cut that out. Cancer didn't have a chance to spread. Because this guy had what he thought, in that moment, possibly the worst day of his life by wrecking on his bicycle, and he's in all sorts of pain and agony and that kind of thing. But nope, he's good. A backhanded healing miracle. I'll also add to the ways that Jesus heals something that we, in society in general, often overlook. Hospitals, places for treating the sick and injured, are Christian inventions. In the ancient world, medical care was highly specialized in terms of who got treated, where they got treated, and by whom they got treated. Example, yeah, there were military field hospitals, really good at people who had, sword wounds and injuries from fighting in battles. I don't know how to, no idea what that infection is. Can't help you with that. There was no one place where a person would go and be seen by physicians who had a broad spectrum of abilities. That is, until the Basiliad, a hospital founded by St. Basil of Caesarea in 369. It was noted because it had all sorts of different types of care and treatments available. It was one of the first places to include housing for those who were sick, so they're not wandering around getting everybody else sick. It even had places to train both upcoming physicians and people who didn't have any skills. While you're here, let me teach you how to shoe a horse. While you're here, let me teach you how to tan leather. While you're here, let me teach you how to weave or plot or whatever it is. Christianity set the standard. Other organizations have picked it up, but with no Christianity, hospitals as we know them wouldn't exist. A second way of healing. Jesus can heal us of our emotional pain. Loss, trauma, repressed anger, anxiety, it all damages us. These emotional wounds impact the quality and way we live our lives. We avoid fully living our lives because some things stir memories which are too painful. And as a result, we miss out on certain beautiful moments because we fear that they'll cause a deep sadness or anger to well up in us. If we're to experience those emotions, if we're willing to experience those emotions, not alone, but with Jesus, we can learn to navigate those tumultuous waters. If we allow Jesus to walk with us in our emotional vulnerability, as that government official did, Jesus shares our experience about our loss, our anger, our anxiety, and we have a co-pilot to help see us through the tough moments and help us experience some healing of those wounds. Sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, emotional pain becomes a spiritual pain. Circumstances cause a person to feel shame and guilt. Guilt being how we think of ourselves for what we have done. Shame being how we think about ourselves in terms of who we are. Our guilt, and more often our shame, can lead us to think and believe that we are unworthy. We're not good enough. The world oftentimes tells us we're not good enough. We tell ourselves we're not good enough. Despite that, Jesus reaches out to us. Jesus says, however you think about yourself, I know it. I know how you think about yourself. Might not be accurate. Probably isn't accurate. I think you're better than you think of yourself. And I love you. Even if you are as awful as you think you are. Jesus is saying, I love you. I love you so much. I love you so much. I suffered. I was nailed to a cross. I died, and I rose from the dead to prove how much I love you. I love you despite your forgetting that you are a child of God, created in God's image and loved by God. That's spiritual healing, when one can hear those words and be willing to accept them, or at least contemplate them and consider them. So physical healing can be important. Eventually, we're all going to die. Unless, of course, Jesus comes back before we get around to dying. That's why there's 30 dishes in my sink right now. But through emotional and spiritual healing, we as individuals can re-enter into relationships and experiences which we felt unworthy of enjoying. We thought, no, that's not for us. I'm not good enough. I can't. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough to participate. Jesus, if we accept and believe and trust, will heal us in the way and time we need. Maybe not in the body as we wish, when our back aches as we get up in the morning, as we all grow just a little older every day. Jesus will begging us to let us heal our souls. We should all give Jesus that opportunity.